Chris Park in Shooting Sports. This is the Keck Optics Precision 34 being a 34mm tube, and this is in 5-30 by 56 specification. The 34mm tube is great because it gives you a little bit more mechanical elevation within the tube. You know, there's 26 milliradians up and down in there, and there's 17.4 left and right for windage. It comes with a set of extra high Picatinny rings, which is great for air rifles and rimfires, which I think is the market that this is more designed for, but I'll tell you more about that in a minute. Those extra high Picatinny rings, of course, if you've got a flat top receiver, flat top rifle, well, you've got more elevation under this big 56mm objective body, which of course is letting more light into the tube, giving you a brighter image. External appearance is very neat. It's been well made, all the way anodizing smooth. It doesn't take all the skin off your fingers. It comes with pop-up front and rear lens caps, and it also comes with a 76mm sunshade. There is a small polymer little key tool here for taking the tops off the rings for when you're setting up your windage and elevation from primary 0 point. Now, if I do that on camera, you've seen me do it a little bit on the video, but here it is in a bit more detail. To set the elevation up, once you've actually set your 0 point, you undo that little cap screw there, take that off the top, then you can put it back down to show exactly where you want your elevation zeroed. Setting up the 0 stop involves using your Allen key. There are 3 circumferential grub screws in there. Slacken those off, rotate it all the way clockwise, tighten them back down, put the turret back in place, and you're ready to go, dialing from whatever range you zero at out into the distance. I tend to zero rimfires at 50 meters so I can dial out further. Air rifles I'd probably set at maybe 25. The click values on the turret are clearly marked, and on this one we've got 0.1 milliradian, which is 10mm at 100 meters. This is a first focal plane optic, so realistically it's following the current market trends and the most modern solutions for the metric elevation and windage systems. Being first focal plane, as you zoom in and out, the reticle appears to get larger and smaller because that stays in perfect collaboration with the actual dial corrections on both turrets. The turrets are nicely engraved, they're well marked, it's easy to make clicks on them, and you can feel them and see them. They seem quite repetitive, and I've had no problem tracking out to longer distance on shots. Elevation's obviously just marked up from 0, there's 10 milliradians per turn, and windage is again same click values, but you just pop that turret out there and that is lift to turn effectively, and it zeroes in the same way, although it doesn't have the 0 stop of course, and you just set it so it marks 0 as centre. The back end of the scope here shows a fast focus collar for precise reticle precision and diopter adjustment. Gives you minus or plus 2 diopter to compensate for your eyesight, and once that's set up you don't really need to move it again. Similarly, on top you've got a nice knurled collar here just to match all the knurled collars elsewhere on it, and there's also a throw lever there to make the magnification controls a little bit faster, but if you choose not to use that, I took that off when I had the trigger cam on. It's actually very easy to grab this nice knurled surface here, it's grippy, and that rotates smoothly with perfect clean stops end to end, and there's no perception of the actual internal helical structures moving. So I'm quite pleased with that because it's indicative of just general overall machining standards. Similarly, all the threads are very nicely crisply cut, precise, and you don't have any problem putting any caps in or things like that. So that again indicates good machining factors. Now, illumination on the reticle is just the centre red cross, and illumination's in 6 stages on the left here with intermediate off positions. But last but not least is the parallax control, and this is where this scope speaks to me and says I'm really more interested in air guns and rimfires than centerfires. The wide elevation range is great for airguns because they do have a generally more loopy trajectory even at close range. But what you'll notice actually is on the side parallax here, parallax control goes from 10 yards to infinity, and that 10 yards goes from 10 yards here all the way through to 100 in a half rotation of that collar. Now actually you then go from 100 to infinity in less than an eighth of a turn, so you have a little bit less precision when you're setting up those longer range parallax solutions. You can get a clear image, but you can't quite have that mechanical precision you had at the closer ranges. But of course, conversely, at the close ranges, you can use full magnification all the way down to 10 yards, and you can dial that to get perfect, crisp image and no parallax at all, giving you a problem. Now it's important to say that with the trigger cam on top, although you get video footage of it, the trigger cam is not a true representation of what you see with your eyes, because the trigger cam cannot auto-focus. You've got to manually focus it. And as you change magnification on any scope, eye relief does change fractionally. Now this scope's got eye relief of 95 to 96mm, which is about middle of the market. Some more benefits about that in a second. But essentially when you change that magnification, because it fractionally changes the eye relief, well, you don't notice that with your human eye because it's automatically refocusing and your reticle stays sharp. You then change the parallax side focus to make sure the image is clear. Well, the trigger cam can't do that. All it can do is compensate for the fact that you've set it up at a first magnification set, but when you change it from that, it's not quite as precise. So please don't think the trigger cam is a true representation of the clarity that this scope does offer. It only works at one specific magnification setting, which on this one happened to be at full magnification, and of course being a very hot time of the year, well, there's a lot of mirage, so you're kind of, you know, weighing one off with the other there. Now, talking about that eye relief of 95 to 96mm, that's about middle of the market. You get a lot of really good high precision scopes that are, you know, 4 or 5 times the price of this at least, which give you about 90mm of eye relief. And that doesn't sound very much, but the thing is, they give you a very forgiving eye box with a very good reticle picture and crystal clear imaging. Conversely, you tend to get some scopes that, you know, boast magnum eye relief, where you don't necessarily need magnum eye relief, and when you go to 100, 101mm, it tends to feel a bit constrictive because it's so big on the gun, you need to push it so far forward, and you tend to crane your neck back a little bit off the stock, because especially on air guns and rimfires, you might not have as much physical space on the gun. So extra long eye relief isn't necessarily always a good thing. And I find personally that long eye relief scopes are more critical on the eye box, and the eye box is generally the distance from correct eye relief that you've got backwards and forwards while maintaining full vignette free sight picture. On long eye relief scopes, that distance seems to be a little bit more critical. On the 90mm scopes, so it's the high-end ones, well, you've got very versatile positioning on those comparatively. And this one, at 95, 96mm, gives you middle ground on that, because at an entry level like this scope is, it's nice to be able to have it not too critical. And as you can see from the video, I've shot it from several different positions, you know, representing general field usage. And I have to say, I did find this scope quite relaxed and easy to get on with. I would go as far as to say this scope gives me a visually relaxed environment, which I'm very pleased to say. The scope itself is not expensive, it's £369 retail, and I believe at the moment from Sure Shot Airguns there is actually a £330 special offer. Now, okay, you can't expect it's going to give you the same precision, the same performance as a £3,000 or £4,000 scope, but it does what it says it will do for airguns and rimfires extremely well, and I didn't have any problems with it. Overall length is 388mm, so it's quite big, and that's not including the actual 76mm sunshade as well, and overall weight is 947 grams. So it's not super heavy given the specification it is, because let's not forget, this is a 34mm tube. It's got lots of elevation and windage travel, and it's got a 6 times erector tube, so you can go from 5 all the way up to 30 times magnification. And of course, with that minimum 10-yard parallax capability, which is focus as well, you can use that whole magnification range on an airgun, not just rimfires and centerfires at longer distances. So it does make for an extremely good scope to get the most precision out of your air rifle. Keck advertised the fact this has got HD glass in it. It's also waterproof, dustproof, all the usual variables for atmospheric resistance. The manufacturing standards, as I've said before, do seem quite good, and I like the fact it's been kept smooth. There's not too much logos on it, and the reticle is a really nice balance between giving you enough aim off marks without being overly busy and obscuring too much of the target, which when it comes to spotting bullet splash or pellet splash and things like that into the background, it can be very, very critical to have a nice clear sight picture to make sure you can see that swirl and trace going through the field of view as you're shooting. Colour rendition's been very neutral, and I've had no problem changing magnification. It's not been affecting zero, anything like that. The scope has tracked perfectly well. It's returned back to zero after shooting multiple distances, so that is itself reassuring. Image clarity is very good, the field of view is flat, and you get edge-to-edge clarity on it, and there's not particularly any problem with actually any chromatic aberration or anything like that. And of course, in the current summer conditions with some very bright sunlight, it's been really handy having the sunshade or without the sunshade. Even without the sunshade, it's not suffered from reflections from within the tube, which is usually the sign of a poor scope. Well, I hope you've enjoyed watching that review. This isn't a super expensive scope at £369, but it's offering a lot to the entry-level shooter who wants to get the most from their airgun or rimfire rifle. It really does produce everything it advertises it can do, and I've actually found it's actually quite pleasant to use, and I actually enjoyed using this and find it more honest than some very, very expensive scopes, which I find a little bit disappointing sometimes given what they claim to be able to do. So have a look at the Keck Optics range. I'll put a link to Sure Shot Airguns on the description of this video. There are other magnification ranges available, and there are also first and second focal plane options with different reticles too. But in the meantime, please like, subscribe, comment, click the notification bell and keep track of my regular uploads. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.